those are called flashbulb moments. A flashbulb moment is something that happens in the moment of where you're at and what you're doing, where you see something, hear something, smell something, feel something, taste something that makes an immediate connection to an emotional memory store that allows then that memory to come flooding back into consciousness.
Stay tuned. Coming up in this episode, it's part 2 of a 2-part show where I address over 40 questions that were asked by more than 700 attendees of the free Situational Awareness Foundations course that I offered the first week of April. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Every day, the hard-working men and women at Midwest Fire build the most reliable firefighting apparatus to be found anywhere. Their customers know a well-built fire engine means lives and property saved. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer dedicated to helping you extinguish fire before it becomes a raging beast. To learn more about what fuels their passion, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to episode 317 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. A quick note here on the front end, if you're thinking about hosting a program during or when the pandemic's over, now is the time to get it on your calendar. I'm actively booking programs for fall of 2020 and booking programs for 2021 right now. I had 44 programs postponed as a result of the pandemic, and now they're looking for their slots to book, and there is a pent-up demand that is filling up slots in the fall and the beginning of 2021. So if you're thinking about it, head over to the website, click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the website. Today's feature segment is sponsored by the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The Online Academy trains and certifies your members on situational awareness skills essential for improving high-risk decision-making outcomes. To learn more about this highly acclaimed program, visit the SAMatters.com website and click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the home page, and I will contact you. Today's program is part 2 of a 2-part show where I will be addressing the questions asked during the free Situational Awareness Foundations program that I offered 14 times between April 2 and April 8. In case you missed those programs, you can go back and watch episode 315 because I recorded the event and I put it out as a show. Before we start, I just want to let you know that all the training programs that I have done live are now available in the virtual format. I can customize programs for your organization as well. To learn more about our virtual programs, visit SAMatters.com, click the virtual training tab under the training programs header at the top of the homepage. For those of you who subscribe to the SA Matters newsletter, I will also be sending out information periodically about virtual training programs, including special offers for online training. Finally, if you're new to the show, stick around after the feature segment and I'll share some more information about our mission, how you can attend a live or host a live program, how you can get connected with us on social media, and how to subscribe to our newsletter. All right, so let's jump into our feature segment today, part 2 of the 2-part show where I address over 40 questions from the free Situational Awareness Foundations course, which was episode 315.
Is there anything a new firefighter can do to improve intuition and situational awareness? Well, to improve the situational awareness, it's practice. Practice the 3-step process toward developing awareness and all the component parts and the questioning mindset and all those things that I shared during the program. improving intuition comes with building the database. The more information stored in the database, the more you learn, the more you practice, the more you train, the more you read, the more videos you watch, the more experiences you learn from others, the more knowledge that gets built into the database. And the the volume of information available for intuition is a factor of how much we're willing to dedicate ourselves to the act of learning. I have met, because the question's from a firefighter, I've met firefighters that have been on the job for a year that probably have 5 years worth of experiences stored in memory because of how active they've been at training and learning and reading and talking with people about their experiences. And I've met some people that have been on the job for 20 years and they essentially have 1 year of experience and they've repeated it 19 times because after that first year, they have done so very little to improve their knowledge base. Very little training, very little reading, very little active learning. And in comparing those two, that person with the 1 year who accelerated their learning is probably got a stronger database to trigger intuition than that person who's been on the job for 20 years has. You mentioned the limited capacity to short-term memory as being 5 to 7 pieces of information and suggested we focus on the most critical pieces of information. Is this similar to span of control? It is based on the same research. The findings that gave rise to the span of control being 5 to 7 pieces of information was actually from a psychologist at Harvard University in the mid-1950s. And they were trying to determine how many digits a phone number should be. And it was through George Miller's research at Harvard that they determined that the average person's short-term memory capacity is 5 to 7 pieces of information, give or take 2. And it was that research that gave rise to the creation of a 7-digit phone number system, which then they have since added, the area code, so it's 10 digits. But it's the 5 to 7 pieces of short-term memory limit that gives rise to the span of control being 5 to 7 direct reports to a person, because they can keep track of what 5 to 7 people are doing. And that's probably on the high end, because as you put people under stress, the limitations decrease. The 5 to 7 pieces of information go down to 3 to 5. So if you have somebody operating under stress and you're thinking about span of control, you should really be thinking about 3 to 5 direct reports because of how short-term memory kind of contracts when a person's under a high degree of stress. Sometimes I remember the source of information I retrieve out of memory, and sometimes I think I'm just inventing it in my imagination. In other words, it didn't really happen the way that I remember it. Is this possible? Absolutely, that is possible. You're not imagining it. It really can happen. It's a phenomena called confabulation. Confabulation means the brain is making up its own reality. The problem with this is oftentimes when the brain is confabulating a reality, we don't realize in the moment that our brain is actually confabulating a reality. It can be taking various parts of various past experiences and morphing them together to create a single narrative that is a little bit of different stories or different experiences melded together, which then can give us the belief that we have a stored experience of a certain set of facts. And the truth of the matter is, what we have is a hodgepodge of facts and past experiences that have been kind of assembled together that allows us to believe that we really did experience something, or that it really did occur the way that we're remembering it, but what we're actually remembering is a confabulated reality. Do you have a tip or a best practice to help me to catalog the source of information I store in memory so I can reference the source when I recall it? Well, it depends on how important that remembering the source is. Oftentimes it's more important to remember the lesson than to remember the chapter and verse of to where we learned the lesson. Now, it's a lot easier to justify your decisions when you're making a decision and you say, I made this decision because on this date at this location I attended this training and this person gave me this set of rules to apply or these instructions. But to do that, all that information would have to be in the conscious memory or readily recallable subconscious memory that we can call up and remember those details. And a lot of times, those details aren't necessary. Now, it might make you feel better to be, if you could make a decision and identify the chapter and verse of the source of that decision. In fact, that's what makes, depending on our intuition, so challenging. Is intuition is a feeling, not explicit memory. And what you're talking about here is explicit memory of not just knowing it, but being able to cite how I know it. Where with intuition, we're making decisions based on subconscious stored memories that we don't have readily access to the reference of the source. So it's a lot more comfortable to make decisions when we can cite the source. The only way you could do that is to create a connection to the source, to the information, with repetition or with emotions attached to it. Like, I can remember certain professors teaching certain things to me and remember their face and remember their names, but it's only because I had at that moment some kind of emotional connection, or a fire instructor, some kind of emotional connection to what they were saying to me that was so powerful that not only do I remember the lesson, but I also remember who taught it to me. And I might even remember, in some cases, where I was when they taught it to me. But the truth of the matter is, most of the time, the important thing is just to remember the lesson and not necessarily the reference or the source of it, and unless you're looking to vindicate yourself to your intuitive decisions. You talked about improving subconscious stores of knowledge through the use of simulated exercises. Is it helpful to have a mentor or someone with more experience sharing experiences with me as a newer member? The answer is absolutely. It's tremendously valuable if you can have someone share with you truthful, non-exaggerated stories in the form of teachings and lessons. Sometimes when somebody tells a story or a war story, they can tend to embellish the truth of what happened. Sometimes they do that on purpose, and sometimes they do it by accident because they're perhaps confabulating their reality. But learning vicariously through the experiences of others is some of the best learning that we can get, because we can learn about very dangerous experiences of someone else's and how they maneuvered through it and how they made their decisions and how they lived based on their decisions. And we don't have to actually experience that ourselves. And that experience shared with us by them then gets stored in memory and becomes a file there that we can access that would help our decision making through intuition based on that subconscious store of knowledge shared by someone else's, a mentor's experiences. How can I prioritize the information I'm gathering on the front end of an incident to avoid information overload? Well, a lot of times when we come into a situation, there is massive amounts of information that we're being exposed to, dozens, if not hundreds of pieces of information. And we have to learn how to prioritize so that we don't become overloaded and overwhelmed. And probably one of the best ways to do this is to think about the situation that you're going to be in advance, and to gather an inventory of what those most important pieces of information are that you're going to need when you get to that situation. And if you can identify those most pressing pieces of information in advance, it makes it easier for you to seek that information, capture and hold that information, versus having a whole lot of pieces of information coming at you that you really don't know what's important and what's not. A good example of this is to think of a jigsaw puzzle. If I gave you 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and I said put it together, and I dumped it out on the table and hid the box so you couldn't see the cover, probably the first thing you'd do is spread all the pieces out on the table so they're all flat. Then you turn them all face up so that the information means something. You're not just looking at cardboard, you're actually looking at something that has a color and a texture. And then you're going to go searching for arguably the most important pieces of information that's going to help you to start to assemble that puzzle. And that's the corners. Because the corners represent facts, and the facts prime access to intuition. And you know that those four corners go in four certain places, and that is enough to prime our ability to figure out how to solve a problem. And then from the corners, we add edges, because the edges are facts. Because if we have a flat edge, then we know that that makes the frame around the problem. We start with corners, add edges, develop a frame, and then fill the information in from the outside in. And we want to start with a small number of the most important pieces of information. We can identify those, whatever those corners would be, in advance, and focus on those, seek those pieces of information out and focus on those to help us to begin to form our awareness. Can I physically react to a problem without knowing why I am reacting that way? Yes, you can. That physical reaction is called muscle memory. And that muscle memory is a programming that resides in the subconscious. The more we practice performing a task, the more we can perform that task automatically without conscious thought. So we can find ourselves doing something physically without at all thinking about what we're doing, because it's automatic. It's muscle memory. And you can literally do things without thinking about what you're doing and why you're reacting a certain way. Is it possible for me to develop intuition for incidents I will be responding to? Yes, by training, by past experience, by videos, by reading, by using a mentor, preloading those experiences by using simulation software and creating simulated events similar to the ones that you're going to be facing in the real world. You can build up the subconscious stores of knowledge that can give you access to intuition for events that you have never yet really experienced in the real world. Is there a way I can control my mind drifting? I kind of addressed this in an earlier question, so I'll be brief about it. And that is just to be mindful of your own awareness, to keep yourself in the conscious, in the moment. You can do this by talking to yourself and talking your way through your level of alertness, your level of vigilance, the things that you're seeing, the things that you're hearing, talking to you, being inquisitive, asking yourself things like, what does this mean? Is this what I expected? What's going to happen next? To keep yourself in the moment. The bored mind is going to drift. The confused mind is going to drift. So the more we can keep confusion down and the more we can keep boredom down by remaining in the moment, then the less likely it is that the mind will drift. What are gut feelings based on? Gut feelings are based on subconscious stores of knowledge that when the brain is searching through experiences, trying to find a solution to problems, it can tap experiences out of the subconscious. If it finds experiences that raise cause for concern, it can send a message over to the emotional control center of the brain, which then is connected to nerve impulses that travel down the spinal cord and split off and come into the gut. So when you get that knotted up, squeezed up gut feeling, that's your brain trying to alert you to the potential for danger based on experiences that it has matched in your subconscious. You mentioned the feeling of doom if our brains pattern match a bad outcome stored in memory. What will I feel if my brain matches a good outcome stored in memory? Well, if you have, we all have stored in memory, I would suspect, a series of lessons that are bad outcome lessons and a series of lessons that are good outcome lessons. If we pattern match bad outcome lessons, we can get gut feelings and feelings of doom, the voices in our head saying, I don't think you should be here, I don't think this is a good idea. But when the brain pattern matches a series of successful outcomes, we can experience the opposite of doom, which is euphoria or bliss or a feeling that everything is going perfectly to plan. And the internal voice inside of our head might be saying, wow, you're really smart. Wow, this is going really well. Everything is going perfectly here. This is amazing. And it's kind of giving you positive reinforcement based on a match of subconscious stores of successful outcomes. Now, when I'm giving advice to first responders, what I say is, if you get the bad gut feeling, the doom, the voices giving you warning, heed that. Even if you can't necessarily prove why you're feeling that way, heed it and put yourself in a position to be safe. And that sometimes means stop what you're doing or even leave where you're at. If you get a feeling of bliss or euphoria, it can actually be false intuition because the brain can pattern match successful outcomes and miss bad outcomes. So always validate that euphoric feeling by searching for proof and evidence and facts and data that validate things are going as well as you think they are. And maybe they are going that well, but just prove it or validate it by searching for the facts or evidence. Do first responders have better instincts than the average person? I think they have better instincts as it relates to the kind of work we do as first responders. The more experience you have, the better instincts you might have about situations of danger related to the work that we do. You might have better instincts about how a patient is presenting versus a lay person. You might be able to look at a person from across the room and realize they're having a heart attack, where a lay person might not be able to pick up those clues at all, or they wouldn't be as readily apparent to a lay person. So for those things related to our work, I think we have better instincts. I think we could also have better instincts for signs of danger because of the environments that we work in are so often danger-filled environments that we might have better instincts toward capturing those things that represent danger. And those are the primal tripwires to danger are things that are loud, things that are bright, things that are moving, and things that move toward us like saber-toothed tigers on attack. So a first responder through experience could have a greater vigilance for those primal tripwires than, say, the average person. Be easier, not be easier. it would be plausible to think that you could develop skills that would allow you to have a better vigilance for danger based on repeated exposures to dangerous environments. Where can I learn more about the barriers to situational awareness? The best way to learn about all the barriers to awareness is if you visit my website, samatters.com. And as soon as you go there, if you're in business and industry, you click and go down one lane for business and industry content. If you're first responder, you click and go down the lane for first responder content. So it doesn't matter which lane you go down, you'll end up on a home page. And if you scroll down that home page, there will be a red box on the home page called the Periodic Chart of Situational Awareness Barriers. And if you click that red box, that'll take you through to something that looks like a periodic chart of the elements, which actually ends up then every one of those colored boxes on that chart is a situational awareness barrier, which then on the website, every one of those is a clickable link. So for example, one of them is stress. So if you go to the box that has stress listed and click on it, it'll take you through to a listing of all the content on the website that is tagged for stress, all the blog articles, all the podcast episodes, and you can read or watch shows that relate to different aspects and topics related to stress. So that's probably the best way to learn about all the barriers to awareness. I've written about them in 6 different books that I've written, and the books are available in the store on the website as well. But you could just as easily use the periodic chart as a way to access information about the barriers. Can you share some more about how to adopt a mindset of curiosity? Yes, the mindset of curiosity means that when we're trying to understand what's happening in the world around us, we don't take things at face value. We ask ourselves the deeper meaning of the things that we're seeing and the things that we're hearing. And we ask ourselves, is this what I expected to be seeing or hearing? The mindset of curiosity means that there's always more to the story than what we're seeing is the surface information. And to dig deeper with that inquisitiveness, with that curiosity to say, what is going on that I'm not seeing as the surface clues? What is meant beyond what I'm hearing as the surface clues? And this is a skill set that you can develop, is just to mentally always be curious about our environment and why things happen. Like when you go for a walk and you see things in nature that are a certain way, is to ask yourselves, why is this way? Why does this happen this way? And sometimes you're able to figure it out, and sometimes you're going to have to go back and do some research to see why things are a certain way. But as you do that, then you're learning, how to think deeper and how to be curious and how to learn more beyond what we see as the surface. It's just kind of like when you get in your car and you start your car up and you drive somewhere. If you don't ever think about what's happening under the hood, then when something goes wrong, it's a little hard to figure out how to fix it. Where if you understand what's happening inside the motor on a deeper level, then it might be easier to troubleshoot the issue and maybe even troubleshoot a solution to that problem by having a deeper understanding of what is happening because of a mindset of curiosity. Does best practice of being perceptive of the 5 to 7 most critical pieces of information or focal points at an emergency scene apply to everyday decision making? Yes, I think it applies to all aspects of life. The more we develop these understanding of our abilities and our limitations, the easier it is for us to be able to capture and process and understand and make predictions of the future, the whole process of situational awareness. Now, the only difference here is when we're in high stress environments, that 5 to 7 most critical pieces actually goes down because of stress, down to 3 to 5. So as you're practicing developing, capturing 5 to 7 pieces of information in everyday type environments, if you're not stressed, just be mindful of the fact that when you're stressed, those things that you're going to focus on or be able to hold in short-term memory are going to be reduced to 3 to 5. But by all means, use it in all aspects of everyday situational awareness development and everyday decision making. What's the connection of left brain / right brain thinking to situational awareness? The left brain is predominantly, we use both sides of our brain all the time. So we're not like an always left brain person or right brain person. We use the whole brain all the time. But in the left brain are stored our critical thinking, analytical, mathematical abilities. And the right brain is stored our creative thinking, our musical, artistic data or skills. When we're under stress, left brain thinking, the critical analytical, actually slows down, and our resilient creative thinking, right brain, speeds up, which is good because that helps us to be able to come to creative solutions to problems without a lot of analysis. And a lot of times, problems that we're dealing with don't allow a lot of time for a lot of analysis. We have to think high level, big puzzle pieces, put it together quickly, and come up with a solution that is going to result in an outcome that's going to save something or save someone. And if we were hung up on left brain thinking, we would be hung up with needing more information for more analysis, and then more analysis would give rise to the need for more information. And in fact, we get to the point where we have too much information coming at us, and we can experience analysis paralysis. Literally the paralyzation of the executive function of the brain to the point where we can't make a decision at all because we're locked into that analytical thinking left brain mindset. So in a high stress situation, the brain basically says, we don't have time to do a lot of analysis. We have time to do access to intuition and come up with a creative solution to this problem that we are going to base on a limited amount of information, not 100% of the data, but enough to make a good decision. And we're going to then make a decision and make a prediction and put a plan into action. Can flawed situational awareness be the root cause of error? There's some controversy about whether it can or it can't. So I can only share my perspective on this. And I don't think that flawed situational awareness is a root cause to error. I think flawed situational awareness is a symptom to error or human error. And the reason I say that is because there's always, behind flawed situational awareness, there's always barriers that cause the situational awareness to be flawed. And there's almost 100 of these barriers. And I mentioned earlier about that periodic chart of situational awareness barriers. If you go to the website and look at them, you'll see them all listed there. Those are more linked to the causation of error than flawed awareness. So for example, if somebody had flawed awareness and their explanation was, well, I just wasn't paying attention. Well, you were paying attention to something. So what caused you to not be paying attention to that which you should have been paying attention to? And then we introduce the barriers. Well, I was task fixated. I had mind drift. I had information overload and didn't know what to focus on. I had too much information and couldn't process the amount of information coming at me, short-term memory overload. So the flawed awareness actually becomes then a symptom of the outcome, and then the root cause is really the barriers that caused the flawed awareness. Are accidents more influenced by culture, systems, and policies, or human error and unintended results? I think it's all potentially in play. I think that an organization's culture can cause situational awareness problems and cause human error problems. For example, if you have a culture of where people have very strong opinions and personalities and ego and bravado, that can cause somebody to do things that their better judgment tells them they shouldn't do, that their situational awareness would be flying big red flags that say this is not a smart thing to do, but they do it anyhow because culture influences it. Systems, policies can set things into motion that require somebody to do things a certain way because it's policy, even though they might know better, but they don't want to violate the policy, so they end up doing whatever the policy says. And then after the fact, they might admit, I knew better, but I was simply following policy. And of course, then, there is human error and those things that are unintended that occur that contribute to accidents as well. So I don't think it's any one of these. I think it's all of these. And the job of the person who evaluates or investigates is to, without bias, take into consideration all of these potential factors. Was there a cultural connection, a system connection, a policy connection, a human error connection, and not come into it preconceived that any one of those was more prevalent or more important than the other, but to use a process of assessment to determine what were the connections to all of these to that particular accident, and then from that make recommendations for improvements. How can we work on accessing the subconscious memory stores? Again, I think I've addressed this, but I'll just say it again briefly. Repetition of learning cycles is probably one of the best ways to access subconscious, is just to continue repetition cycles of learning. Once we learn it once, practice physical skills, practice knowledge skills, practice the cognitive, the what do I need to know, when do I need to know it, why do I need to know it, practice the kinesthetic or muscle movement memory skills of how do I do it. And that constant reinforcement of practice of both cognitive and kinesthetic greases the highway to the access to the subconscious. And of course, the more emotional a connection is to experiences, then the more likely we are to be able to have ready access to it as well. If you could only provide one message about situational awareness, what would it be? I have no idea what a single message would be. That'd be like sending somebody out into the world and say, if you're going to turn somebody loose out in the world, what's the one thing they need to know? I don't think there's any one thing that someone could know that would cover all the things they need to know. And I don't think there's any one component part to situational awareness that someone would need to know. So if I could sum it up in maybe a few parts, one would be to have a good foundational understanding about what situational awareness is and how to develop it, the perception, understanding, and prediction, and to then practice those component parts so that it becomes second nature or automatic, and then to have a good understanding about the barriers that flaw awareness and the best practices as to how to maneuver through or to overcome those barriers. So I think that those things together as a package certainly could help someone in developing and maintaining situational awareness, but I couldn't think of just one message that would be, it's just not that simple. That's kind of like saying, what's the one thing a pilot needs to know to successfully fly a plane? There isn't just one thing. I mean, there are a lot of important things, like looking out the window for things you're going to run into would be important. And so it's not that simple, unfortunately. Can subconscious knowledge or memory of events be triggered by a smell, a sound, or an image? Yes, it can. So those are called flashbulb moments. A flashbulb moment is something that happens in the moment of where you're at and what you're doing, where you see something, hear something, smell something, feel something, taste something that makes an immediate connection to an emotional memory store that allows then that memory to come flooding back into consciousness. And it can happen, and that's called a flashbulb moment. Is there any way to prime your memory to handle a particular circumstance without ever having experienced the circumstance before? Yes. Any time you vividly imagine yourself in a circumstance, your brain stores a memory of it. So one of the best ways to do that is through simulated scenarios, simulated training scenarios, using computer simulations. Nothing replaces the real experience. I've got to put an asterisk on this, a little disclaimer here. Ideally, I'd like for you to get all of your experiences in the real world, real time, firsthand, but that's not always possible. So we can build those experiences through training, through watching videos, through simulated exercises, through mock events where we create a scenario and we manage it as a mock training exercise or a mock disaster, so to speak. And all of those experiences then build memory that we can then have access to, even though we've never experienced it before. What is a good strategy to overcome expectation bias? Well, we are all subject to having a variety of biases. In fact, there are dozens of biases that we can experience, and expectation bias is just one of them. And the expectation bias comes from previous experiences with situations or with people lead to us to have in advance an expectation of what that new experience is going to be like based on past experiences. So to help avoid the expectation bias is to come into a situation fresh and clean without any preconceived notions or understanding of how this is going to turn out, or what this is going to be like, or what this person's going to say, or what I already know what I'm going to see, and it's very easy for us to come into a situation, especially if previous experiences have been emotional or traumatic or frustrating, but not necessarily. That can be things that turned out well and exciting as well. Like if you had a successful fishing trip, you can have an expectation bias that I fished the favorite spot that did so well the last time I fished that I know I'm going to catch a lot of big fish when I fish this, but then you don't. They're just not biting that day, but you had this bias expectation based on past experiences. So it can be both good experiences and bad experiences. So to avoid the bias is to set aside anything that we have as a preconceived understanding of what the current situation is going to be like, and come into it with an open mind and willing to allow the circumstances to unfold in real time as they are, without us being prejudging what we know of how it's going to turn out. Is EFT tapping an effective technique for rewiring a bad experience, a bad decision, and or the freeze response? So when this question was asked during the program, I didn't know what EFT tapping was, so I had to go and do some research and learn a little bit about it. And the emphasis on I learned a little bit about it. So what EFT tapping says is we can use a series of tapping our fingers against certain parts of our body while reciting certain statements, and that can have an effect on us by rewiring bad experiences. I don't really know enough about it to have an opinion about it. I'd have to do more research and talk to people who actually do it, people who've actually benefited from it. So the whole concept is new to me. So I don't want to offer an opinion. I want to leave the question in here because it was asked. But I'd say do your own research on the concept of EFT tapping to determine whether it would be something that you would want to use or beneficial for you. I have a difficult time multitasking. Can you give me some tips for how I can improve it? Well, again, tying back to a question that I addressed previously, we cannot multitask the act of consciously paying attention. The subconscious mind can multitask. That's how we can drift out of awareness and still drive the vehicle down the highway safely using subconscious programming. So the subconscious can do many things at the same time. The conscious can only do one thing at a time. If we had to tie this to an example of a computer, think of it as that if you have a desktop computer, inside the box, the computer is doing a lot of different things simultaneously. Access to internet, maybe it's scanning for viruses, maybe it's doing auto updates and saves. So the box, which is the subconscious, can multitask a lot of things. But on your desktop of your computer, we'll call that the conscious side of your brain, you can only do one thing. You can only type an email or read a Word document. You cannot simultaneously type a Word document and type an email. You can type a little bit of one and a little bit of the other and a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, but you can't do them both at the same time. We alternate our attention back and forth consciously, just like we alternate between typing the email and typing the Word document. We shift attention back and forth. We can't multitask the act of paying attention, which when we think we can, it just causes us to do a lot of things bad all at the same time, and we are a victim of our belief that we can multitask consciously. We can only pay attention consciously to one thing at a time. We can alternate our attention back and forth. Do blind people have a mental sketch pad? The mental sketch pad is where we draw pictures of understanding in our mind, and absolutely blind people have a mental sketch pad simply because they have they don't have the ability to have biological sight. They still have the ability to have mental sight. Their mind's eye is as robust and arguably in some circumstances more robust than maybe what a sighted person's mind's eye can process and hold. In other words, if I had to give you an example, a blind person at home, an unsighted person who is sitting in their living room and decides they want to get up and cook something to eat, they literally get up, walk to the kitchen, open the cabinet, get a pot out, open the other cabinet, get a can of soup out, get a can opener, open it up, pour the soup in the pot, put it on the stove, cook it, get a bowl, pour it in, and eat it. Well, let a sighted person try to do that with their eyes closed without the benefit of somebody to guide them and help them. How can an unsighted person be so efficient at that? Because in their mind's eye, they have a stored image, a stored map of the layout of that space. So in some respects, their mind's eye, it might be more robust than a sighted person who depends on their biological eyes to see things, where a person without sight depends on their mind's eye to be able to see things. My mind drifts all the time when I'm driving. Is there anything that I can do to prevent it? To stay mindful in the moment by consciously being aware of this of your surroundings. You can talk to yourself about your surroundings, and I've addressed this in a previous question, and have conversations with yourself about the things that you're seeing, the things that you're hearing, what's the meaning of this information, what does it mean for me, what does it mean for my safety, and use that mindfulness of awareness, that meta awareness, that awareness of your awareness, to keep you consciously in the moment. Know that your mind is vulnerable to drift while you're driving, because driving can become routine and boring. Now, if you're in a bad weather event, not so routine and boring, and your mind's less likely to drift. If you're in heavy traffic or in the downtown of an area that you haven't previously driven in, then your vigilance will be high, and the likelihood of your mind drifting is very, very, very much reduced. But if you're on the highway with the cruise set, and it's a straight shot to wherever you're going for a 2-hour drive, the mind can become bored with the surroundings, and then it drifts away and starts to think about other things, and then you are not consciously aware of your act of driving. So to be mindful and remain in the moment. Now, that's easier said than done, and it can be very fatiguing to always be in the moment. It's kind of like constantly lifting weights with your arms. To maintain that heightened level of vigilance is mentally tiring. So it's not something that I recommend, except when a person's in a very high risk environment, to maintain that level of vigilance, because your brain can tire and fatigue very quickly and get to the point where it can't process the meaning of information. It gets overloaded and overwhelmed and basically fatigued from that constant heightened level of vigilance. Okay when you're in a storm, okay when you're in heavy traffic, okay when you're in the downtown. But if you were to go on a 3-hour drive on the highway, to maintain that level of vigilance constantly in the moment would be difficult, if not impossible. Why is it so hard to trust my intuition? Mainly because your intuition is subconscious knowledge. The intuition does not come to us in the form of data and facts. Intuition comes to us in the form of a feeling. We feel intuitive responses. Intuition guides us what to do based on a feeling or the voice in our head trying to talk us into an action or out of an action. And because it's access to subconscious knowledge, we don't always know the accuracy of that information. So it's a little easier to distrust a gut feeling than it is to trust facts and data, which is unfortunate, because the intuition is a massive database of knowledge, if only we can learn to trust it. And I feel like a hypocrite as I give this advice, because I didn't always trust my gut and didn't always trust my intuition for the biggest part of my life and my career as a first responder. And sometimes that led to some not so desirable outcomes, both on emergency scenes and administratively and in my personal life. But I have learned now, because I understand where intuition comes from, to be much more trusting of my intuition. Now, sometimes I will validate that intuition by looking for facts and data, and you have the benefit of doing that if you're not in a life and death situation. If you're life and death situation, you don't always have the time to do that validation. I'm retired now, so I'm not always in such life and death circumstances, so it's a little easier for me to practice it in my day in and day out living. But in the moment, when you're in a time compressed environment and your intuition is telling you this isn't good, you should be heeding what it's telling you and get yourself out of that situation, because the window of opportunity for your survival may be closing quickly, and your intuition is trying to save your life. How can I learn more about the barriers of flaw awareness? I already mentioned that. Just go to the website, samatters.com, and scroll down the homepage to the red box that says periodic chart of situational awareness barriers. Click on that. They're all listed there. All of them are clickable links to information that you can learn more about. So that concludes all of the questions that were asked during episode 315 on the foundations of situational awareness. If you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask me, there's my email and there's my phone number, or you can go to samatters.com and click on the Contact Us tab and send me a question there.
Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 87,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you or someone you care about works in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and survival. I want to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love you. Normally, this would be the part of the show where I thank the organizations that have hosted situational awareness programs, and I would share with you the list of the upcoming programs. But the pandemic and social distancing rules have caused all of my live events to be postponed. So I'd like to take a walk down memory lane and thank those organizations who were hosting programs this time last year. The Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, the Fire Department Instructors Conference, the Washington Fire Training and Safety Officers Conference, the Waconia Fire Department, the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Leadership Series, the Cook County Emergency Management Conference. All of our programs, past, present, postponed, and future, are listed on the SA Matters website. If you're interested in seeing the list of where we've been or where we're going, just head over to the site, scroll about halfway down the homepage, and click on that red box labeled Upcoming Events Schedule. If you're interested in hosting a program, virtual or live, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage, and I will give you a call. Remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to the newsletter, how to follow us on social media, and basically just how to stay connected with us. There we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 317 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you to our platinum sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and the viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gassaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.